This is Defenders TV Podcast episode 126 about The Punisher Season 1, Episode 5, Gunner.
I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues.
Welcome back, Defenders, to this episode of Defenders TV Podcast, episode 126, where we are looking at episode 5 of season 1 of The Punisher, Gunner. Or is it Robin Hood? There were bows and arrows, there were forests, and of course there was Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio as well. It is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves podcast. I'm one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
And rounding out the group, I'm one of your hosts, Chris.
Yeah, men in tights, definitely. I think here.
I don't think we'll ever see Frank Castle in tights. Sorry.
And we have had previous little reference to that from Micro as well.
Mm-hmm. Him being Robin Hood, yes.
Yes.
Not him in tights.
Yeah, he could be.
Well, you never know. Perhaps the first ever Punisher costume was Lycra.
You never know. If we keep following Marvel now or the new Marvel universe, there may have been a first ever Punisher, back in those days.
He could be going deep undercover in his lacy tights. I'm Frank.
That sounded very EastEnders, John.
I know, exactly.
Frank.
Yes, and we're back with Gunner, episode 5 of The Punisher. And this is our spoiler-filled review of this episode. Obviously, I think Robin Hood was not a spoiler, but please, for all this mindless chit-chat, as well as some really interesting discussions and comments, please come on and join us over at our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast.
And if you want to send any thoughts in about the episodes, you can email us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com or pop on over to our website at defenderstvpodcast.com and leave us a voicemail up to 90 seconds of your thoughts about any of the episodes or the entire series of The Punisher. Just make sure you mark which episode it's about. And as we're a podcast, obviously make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can do that over on Apple Podcasts by going through defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes or going to defenderstvpodcast.com and selecting any of the podcast catchers of your choice to subscribe to. And as we learned quite recently over at Chris's house, you can also just say, "Okay, Google, play the latest episode of Defenders TV Podcast." And hopefully your Google player at home will now be playing our latest episode. That's probably annoyed you quite a lot, hasn't it? Sorry, fellow Defenders.
Yeah, but what better way to kick off our day? But let's get on to the episode. Derek, would you like to tell us everything this beautiful Gunner episode gave us?
Yes, this episode was written by Michael Jones Morales, a first-time writer over on the Marvel Netflix shows. He came from Warehouse 13, where he was a staff writer on there, and also on Mind Games, the TV show, and recently he's been working on Into the Badlands and Containment. Also, another first-timer in the Marvel Universe, Irish director Dearbhla Walsh is joining the Marvel Universe. She's done a bunch of TV shows right back in Ireland from Rosnaroon, the soap opera, where she started. Also worked on The Tudors in Ireland and did 7 episodes of the UK's Shameless and worked on 2 episodes of Fargo in the US. And John, she did a couple of episodes of Penny Dreadful.
Yes, she did. She's Penny Delightful.
Yes, wonderful yes. Irish director. Really glad to have her over on The Punisher. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. Waking up bruised and battered after her Steve McQueen moment with Frank Castle, Dinah Madani confides in Sam Stein about her rescue at his hands. Just as she asks Stein to keep the secret, an official Homeland Security investigation into the failed operation gets underway that threatens to expose their secret under oath. Frank and David go looking for answers from the man behind the camera at Zubair's execution, a reluctant witness and former squad mate of Frank's, Gunner Henderson. But they are not the only ones who have an active interest in Gunner. Frank finds Gunner in the Kentucky woods, where he learns from Gunner about Schoonover and Agent Orange's heroin smuggling operation, just as a team of US forces descends on their position. From an office far away, a one-eyed CIA operative directs the operation to silence Gunner. But as his team are picked off one by one with the help from Micro and his recon drone, Agent Orange sees a ghost as the face of Frank Castle looms in the fallen soldier's body cam. Whilst Frank and Gunnar win the battle, Gunnar is mortally wounded and Frank is also seriously wounded, only to be rescued by Micro, who patches him up and drives him back to New York.
Ooh, battling Frank Castle with his partner Gunnar in this episode. Some cool moments in here.
Yeah, very PlayStation first-person shooter.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Loved it, actually. Really liked that camera work. It was pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I really loved the scene. Actually, one of my favourite voice actors, Travis Willingham, who some of our listeners may know from Critical Role, which is a D&D video, I suppose, on YouTube and Twitch, etc., where him and other voice actors like Laura Bailey, Matt Mercer play. He actually was in this. So quite a while ago, he started leaking photos of him running around the woods with in camo. So if you don't know who he is, he's the guy that gets killed by the trap. And the only reason I could think they could get him for that is because as a voice actor, he's quite okay just going for hours upon filming. I was like, interesting.
I like it.
But yeah, great episode overall. Why do we say we get into it?
Absolutely, yeah. If it's your first time joining us for this podcast, we're going to talk about our 5 case notes for this Punisher War Journal, the ones that stood out to us in this episode. John, do you want to kick us off with point number 1, Paige versus Madani?
Yes, I do. This was the battle of the ladies, and I have to say, I really enjoyed this scene between the two, between Karen Page and Dinah Madani. Madani is fresh from the hospital bed. She's still bruised and battered. She brings Page in after kind of going through sort of the file of Frank Castle here, and she sees, that Paige has had a meteoric start to her time in New York. Mm-hmm. And she calls this out as well. But it's a real sort of battle of wills here. And I kind of liked it. We see Karen flip the situation to sort of try and get notes and build a story around what happened down at the docks. But at the same time, I really kind of liked that Madani really makes Karen uncomfortable with some of her questions about Frank Castle. And for me, actually, in my view, it challenges, or Madani really challenges Paige's sort of single view on Frank Castle. And I think her working presumption of that she has the moral high ground with, in a sense, respecting Frank Castle. There are two sides here, and I think it really comes out in this scene between Karen Page and Dinah, and I really, really like it, because I think Karen Page is a great foil for Frank, but at the same time, is she too deep in there, And I think Madani really kind of sort of puts her investigative work and skills to use on Paige here. Mm-hmm. And, to the point where Paige does have to reconnect with Frank down by the river in New York there, and to really try and, in a sense, warn him that she is onto him and has been asking, fairly probing questions about this. I think in particular the Carson Wolf sort of flip by Karen Page was really good, where, it's trying to unsettle Madani here, and both of them were trying to unsettle. I mean, I actually do think that Page is fully aware that Madani knows that she's lying, even though she is giving the standard story that Frank Castle is dead. So yeah, I thought this was a really powerful scene between these two ladies of the Punisher world. Yeah,
definitely. I love the kind of flip, as you say, that Karen Page does, where she effectively says, I'm well informed, much like you must be in your job. It's effectively like she's trying to resettle the playing field, or resettle the battlefield before they get into a real fight here. She's not someone that can just be walked over. She's not just a reporter. She knows what's going on, and knows there's something corrupt going on in Madini's office. That's kind of where she starts out from, and I like that they kind of settle that. There's some great moments in this scene. It's really good.
The very first 2 seconds of the scene, you see Karen kind of nervously twitching with a pen on the table, and I'm like, oh no, she's gonna, does not bode well for this scene. She's gonna get railroaded by Madani.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you guys say, there's this almost flip of the roles. Karen suddenly stops kind of stammering. not stammering, I say, but the nervousness of her speech pattern kind of disappears as things start to as she begins to become more confident in what she is saying, and that she is on an even playing field, as you guys said. Really nice.
I think it's that moment, when Dinah says to her, hold off on this story until the full facts are available, which is effectively almost exactly the words that Ellison, her editor, had said that Carson Wolfe told him a year ago about the story about Micro. So that moment makes Karen Page realize, hang on a second, somebody else in this office is also trying to cover something up here. I'm onto a good lead,
Yeah.
It's that journalistic moment from Karen.
It is, but the great thing is she doesn't realise that cover-up is of Frank Castle himself. And I think that's where then Madani really sort of, again, comes back at Karen, and I think it's almost like a fencing duel or something like that between the two, and I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah.
Okay, but what did you guys think of the reconnection between Paige and Frank by the waterside? Actually, I walked by that waterside last night.
Really?
In Jersey on the way back, yeah.
It's a beautiful area town. Really beautiful scenery around that area.
Beautiful scenery, not a beautiful area of town at night.
True.
What were you doing in a dodgy area of town at night, Chris?
I was driving, I wouldn't say walking by, I was driving by on a bus back to New York from Boston. Beautiful area, do not stop.
Yeah, I thought when Karen sort of meets up with Frank again, I think it's really interesting because, I know I did kind of say about Karen's one world view here, but she does question Frank's endgame, almost the futility of it. And I love her term endless echoing loneliness that she sees is in front of Frank Castle, that his sole focus is about killing these men, but that these men who he will go after will simply be painted as martyrs, and that the stories will be covered up and their narrative will be the one that is told, not Frank's, that almost Frank's dark side of his personality, his involvement in the war in Afghanistan, that his anti-hero story, in a sense, is set in stone by those people in power. That narrative is set. And I think for Karen, being in a newspaper, she is, questioning why he is doing this, just melt away almost, it will be Frank as well that suffers from this, because at the end of it, he's still going to be lonely. He's still going to have his wife and children's deaths, and that he has to try and come to terms with it. So I thought Karen was really good in this episode, and I really liked her in these two scenes. I thought they were really good.
Yeah, I kind of like the fact that she was echoing kind of the Ben Urich version of journalism back from the days of Daredevil season 1 when she was hanging around with him. This idea of, why are you killing these people, Frank? I work for a newspaper. Let's get the story out there and let's take them down. And Frank's kind of going, journalism doesn't work like that anymore. It's just a story. I need to kill these people. And that's kind of when Karen is having this moment of, well, if you kill these people, then there's going to be more people that you have to kill, and you're going to continue on this. I need to see a future for you outside of just killing people that are involved in this death of your family. I do like that. I like that that's her point of view. It's nice to see Karen's point and why she's even dealing with Frank anymore.
Yeah. Quick question as well. When she talks about this endless echoing loneliness, and she then goes on to say, we're all lonely. And I'm just wondering, we've talked about where the Punisher lies within this Marvel Netflix universe timeline.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that in her saying that, there is some kind of reference to losing Matt Murdock here.
Maybe, yeah.
That, she feels lonely now. Whether it's because, they were apart, they had, a bit of trouble in their relationship, and now he's gone. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm wondering about that actually, because I know that this show was greenlit during Daredevil season 2, when just after it aired, the Punisher went into production. Since then, we've had the full season of Iron Fist, we've had the full season of Defenders. I'm not sure whether they were intending on airing the Punisher before the Defenders, or as this release date came so late, whether the decision had been fully made when it was completed as to when it was going to air. So I think they're trying to play on either of those things, either the fact that Karen's separated from Matt Murdock now, or that this is after the end of Defenders and what happens in Defenders. I think it could play either way because of that reason, that they weren't sure when it was going to actually be released on Netflix. So they didn't want to have a definitive mention of what happened in The Defenders because of that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I think potentially, and we'll have a reshoot, or there will have been a reshoot around episode 12, 13 that will probably give us a definitive stamp in time.
Maybe.
Hopefully, because I would like to know where this sits.
Yeah.
Because it is becoming almost too opaque, too non-transparent, because they're just kind of like, well, it could be this or it could be this. We'll let you decide.
To me, I think it's more they're kind of saying it doesn't matter because Defenders, as we said, took place over 3 days. There's a resolution there, and there's not a huge amount discussed here about where Karen's sitting. So I think it can play either way, and I don't know whether they will actually address whether it took place after or not, because, well, the Punisher wasn't in The Defenders, so it doesn't really matter to his story as a character as to when it takes place. We just know it took place after season 2 of Daredevil.
I believe when it takes place does actually count on something, because we're about to see what we know is Karen and Frank going after some pretty high-ranking individuals. Mm-hmm. There will be some serious fallout from this. And as Karen says, some of these people may be painted as martyrs, and the Punisher becomes the Punisher that we know and love from the comic books. This anti-hero. So this will continue as well.
Maybe, yeah.
I think they'll have to address it at some point, but I think you're right. As of right now, as of episode 5 in this storyline, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But it will matter towards the end as the body count rises and the stakes of who is involved and what the fallout is does become more stake-filled, if you will.
Perhaps.
I just wanted to talk about Karen's questioning of Frank's endgame. Shock horror. I am completely in agreement with Karen Page.
Wow.
Yeah. What I'm seeing here is, okay, our previous listeners who have kind of been with us for a while or have gone back and listened to Daredevil Season 1, our coverage there, will know that sometimes I disagreed with Karen, the character. Not Deborah Bramwell, the actress, Karen Page, the character in this, and her motivations and her kind of the way her approach to things. I actually agree with her here completely and wholeheartedly, and I see Frank as being the stubborn army guy, and it's very well written in that he's so entrenched in his own morality and his own point of view that he's refusing to see the actual writing on the wall that Karen is actually putting there. Mm-hmm. Like, this is, the more of these men you kill, the more they'll become martyrs, the more you become the villain. And I think that's a fantastic view of what this is.
Absolutely.
Which is, the more men Frank kills in what we now know, we can talk about it later, the enemy being revealed and where he is, Agent Orange, and who he is. Mm-hmm. Like, now we know potentially who he's going to be in the next few weeks, and Frank killing him then. Frank was in the right, or we believe Frank is in the right, if you believe in an eye for an eye, literally. But I just think, I don't know, I found this really interesting. I found probably that the way her character or the script was written for this scene, I found it connected with me. And I suppose this is the first time in a long time that I've actually gone, and not just in this point, but actually the point where when she's shouting down Madani, that I've really kind of gone, wow, she's saying all the right things and connecting with this character because she's suddenly speaking sense. I think that's my big point.
Okay.
And I'm surprised. But I also thought like it was fantastic. It's interesting to see that Frank is the staunch advocate on this one who is not willing to change his point of view.
Yeah, I think what we saw in episode 3 was that he had made the decision they're all going to die. That's kind of where he is now. He's made that decision. I think it's really important for the show, if it's going to make any kind of impact or cause any kind of discussions, which it wants to cause, that it does present both sides of the argument. There are people, like, I presume most of us, that if somebody wrongs you, you don't take a gun out and kill them. That's not Frank. That's kind of Frank's attitude is, these people have wronged me. I have decided they're going to die. Karen's saying, there is another way out of this. You have another option here. You don't have to go and kill them. So by presenting both sides of that argument, it does create these kind of discussions, which is what we like about the Marvel shows, you know? So it's great that those objections were voiced through the character of Karen. It makes total sense that that would be her character. She's had those same discussions with Daredevil, Matt Murdock, back in Daredevil season 1 and 2, as to why would he do what he does? Why doesn't he just leave it to the authorities? So it does make total sense as to why she would say this.
Definitely, but I think we can move on to War Journal point number 2. And that's, Micro and his steak sandwich and the road trip.
Yes.
This is kind of like the Griswolds go on tour. I kind of really liked this. I thought it was a real nice little connection between Frank and David Lieberman. Frank is busting David's balls all over the show here, both another visit to his wife's house. He's questioning his judgment. He just thinks this guy is a tech head with his head in the circuit board, and doesn't really understand maybe the real world that as Frank conceives it. But you start to see some real kind of sense of respect for David from Frank. I think he mentions to Karen there on the waterfront, his sense of respect for him getting out in front of the people who are chasing him and being able to keep his family safe and alive. This is a real nice sense of developing their partnership here, I think, for the show.
But interestingly,
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, but interestingly, he doesn't even mention it to David. He really just busts his balls the whole time, but then mentions to Karen, actually, he was probably right in doing what he did, but never says it to David at all. It's really like, I want to keep this guy at arm's length. I want to tell him that he's useless and I'm the only useful one here. And then he goes and tells Karen, actually, he did something pretty cool. He kept his family alive by doing what he did. I think that's quite interesting.
He is so mean. Frank is so mean.
He is.
But I did really like him in this episode.
I have to admit, this was a standout episode for me, for the characters alone, the character growth and relationship growth between the characters. But, dude, David is trying to help you, and you're still going, yeah, I'm going to look after your wife.
Yeah, I know.
And he actually is going to see his wife. So I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
You made your point.
Yeah, definitely. I must say, I really liked David's daughter here in this episode. She's talking about Life of Pi, which we see Micro reading later in the woods as he's kind of waiting and doing recon for Frank as he's looking for Gunner. But I think she was really good, and I think you really got a sense from her that she's looking for that father figure back in her life, and that she's kind of wanting Frank to hang around a bit more, even more so than maybe David's wife, Sarah. So I really thought she was played a good little part here. The other thing that I really loved from this road trip was as Micro is making up Frank's dehydrated meal and then whips out a massive sub. I mean, that's the thickest sarnie I've ever seen. I think how Ebon Moss-Bachrach here, his facial expressions are fantastic in that he's trying to keep to himself, how he says, well, you really like that dehydrated stuff. And I have to say, this was the moment when I realized that he could play Gene Wilder, in a Gene Wilder biopic. He has kind of got, with the curly hair and those eyes that are just flitting all over the place in the cabin of that van, as he's kind of ruefully chomping down on his big sandwich. I just thought was absolute class. It made me chuckle. I think it was a real nice little humorous part of this episode.
So if anybody's casting for a new young Frankenstein, you're looking at your Gene Wilder character in there, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Dr. Frankenstein. Frank looks genuinely hurt when he's not given a sandwich. And effectively he's told, well, all the stuff was in the fridge. I just thought you liked the pot noodle, which is what he's eating. Like, it's really important here to remember the last person that gave Frank a sandwich, he killed 8 people for them. Like, that's pretty dedicated to his sandwich loving is our Frank. So yeah, what's he going to do to a guy who doesn't make him a sandwich? Although I suppose he does step up later on in the episode, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But I do love that moment in the road trip. It's always good with these kind of characters when you have this kind of interplay where you have David talking to him and just will not stop talking. This is something that Frank is a character who's just very silent. He will go on a mission and probably wouldn't talk for a week if he didn't need to. And you've got David going on and on about the fact that Cerebus means something different in the original Roman. And effectively the name Cerebus means spotted. So effectively Cerebus the dog is Spot the dog. And that means you're Spot the dog. Isn't that hilarious, Frank? And Frank's like, please just shut your mouth. You're not here for that. Just thought it was a fun little scene between the two of them.
Yeah. And it was the never ending sandwich as well, because the following day he's still chomping down on this massive foot long as he's reading Life of Pi.
Yes.
It is the never ending sandwich.
Yes, and obviously Life of Pi is our book watch for this episode. That's the big book featured in the episode. A great book, by the way, if you haven't seen the film, an awesome movie too. But yeah, who doesn't love a road trip? Chris, do you want to take us on to point 3?
Yes, I do. So, our enemy is revealed in all his one-eyed glory, if you will. Or what I should say, one eye and then one milky eye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, if you have that thing, you'd think you'd wear, like, a Nick Fury eye patch.
No, bad guys don't get those in the Marvel Universe.
Why?
Because it looks much cooler for the good guys to have them.
I'm calling right now for eye patch equality.
I think if it looks that cool, if it's milky and it's got those scars outside, it effectively is saying that, look what I did for the country. I think that's what he's trying to do.
Could you imagine that being your first day at CIA school? And it's like you have, one-eyed, one milky-eyed guy sort of going in saying, yeah, I've had to process a lot of crap for the country, and you will do too. I was like, okay,
it's like, look what I gave up. Look what you might have to give up, kids. Yeah.
Okay, I should have gone for the FBI.
Yes, but he does reveal his name is William Rollins.
Yes! So finally now we know who Agent Orange is. And the fact that he is William Rollins of CIA fame, if you will, or infamy, if you will, is quite interesting. So this character does have quite a history with the Punisher in the comic books. He's been known, I think he came in around the Max series days, which would have been the Garth Ennis run.
Oh, yes.
Back in, I'm going to say the early 90s. I need to check that one, if you will. But he's always been this shady CIA spook.
Right.
Who followed in his father's footsteps, his father working directly with S.H.I.E.L.D. back in the day as well.
Right.
He sees a very thin line between good and bad. It's quite blurred.
Yeah.
And he's always known as that. He's had some great Punisher story arcs. So if you're interested more about this character, check out Mother Russia, Up is Down and Black is White, and finally Man of Stone, which were some of also Valley of Forge. All great Punisher, Max, Garth Ennis storylines.
Cool.
Featuring this character. He's had a sordid relationship with the Punisher. But I'm not going to get into that because I feel they may have drew inspiration for this overall, what they're going to do in this storyline in the series for what they may do here. But yes, Agent Orange, William or Bill Rollins.
Yes.
Yeah, Bill. And he's tapping Madani's office by the looks of it as well. He's listening on her and Sam's conversation. Yeah. So he's certainly got his eyes and ears, or his eye and ears, all over the place. Yeah. And obviously, I think later on, we see him, in that fantastic sort of scene of directing the special ops guys going in to try and capture or kill Gunner. Yeah, so despite his kind of fairly shady background, as we know, he's here. We see him getting the Distinguished Intelligence Medal, and that probably falls into what you were saying, Chris. You know, his idea of where the boundary of good and evil is quite blurred, and maybe everything in service to his country is deemed to be good by him, even if it crosses a moral or ethical line, I suppose. But it's interesting then that potentially here there is a subplot where he could be getting promoted to deputy director, as Marion James, who gives him the medal, is looking to get to be director of the CIA.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like this storyline is that he's taken the opportunity afforded to him by being this high-level member of the CIA that's there to set up and take out targets, very difficult targets of the US. So he's not evil for doing that, for killing the people that he's been told to kill. That's not why he's evil, because effectively that's what Nick Fury does all the time for S.H.I.E.L.D. It's effectively taking out the enemies of the world, the enemies of the planet, the enemies of the US. That's not why he's evil. We find out, obviously, that the reason why he's evil is because, well, he's filling the dead bodies of servicemen with heroin to transport back to the US along with Schoonover. So that's why he's evil. It's not for true. Doing the job of the CIA, because, well, effectively there are people that have to do these kind of dirty jobs, and seems to be more than willing to do it while having a little job on the side to sell a bit of heroin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although I do like it when Marion says, "Is there anything I should be aware of?" And it's like, no. I hope, Marion, you've got a file on him.
Yes. A nice little gag, actually, that Marion is the name of the character. And obviously she did play Marion in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. So a second Marion character for Mary Elizabeth Mastro-Antonio.
Do you think he might cut her heart out with a spoon?
I hope not.
Do you think it's a pure chance that the one episode where we have a guy hunting with a bow that she's introduced?
Nope.
I was like, damn, God, come on, guys, that's on the nose.
No.
Like, you know, they could, if they hadn't even put her at the end of the last episode or introduced her in the next episode. No, they're like, no, we have a guy hunting with a bow.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? This is where Marion comes in. Yeah. I'm like, she must sit there going, I'm forever going to be known as Maid Marion.
Absolutely.
Forever.
It was one of the biggest songs in history.
Yeah, although in fairness, at least it's not The Abyss. I really don't get that movie.
Oh, that's an amazing movie, but a completely different topic. Oh, it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never got it.
Anyway, so on to this. So 2 things on this. One, I'm really, really interested by this overall intro to Rollins, where we see him discuss, well, as he pretty much says, it's like he's done some evil things in order for people to sleep well at night.
And have a cup of coffee in the morning. I've done bad things just to get my first coffee in the morning. Not that bad, though.
No. Well, like, I'm hoping you haven't killed people.
No.
Smuggled heroin.
No. But, if I don't get my coffee in the morning.
It's true. I've seen you without coffee.
True.
I just found this a really interesting, it was a nice way to introduce a character by going, here is the character's motivation.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the character does what he does.
It's quite cool, isn't it?
Why he considers to do what he does.
Yeah. Like, I think it's quite cool because effectively he's the proxy version of so many characters that we've seen leading offices in the CIA and the FBI, but we know his backstory is really bad. Yet he's the one that's introducing these new young recruits into the CIA, but right behind the facade that he's presenting to them, he's doing some pretty bad, shady stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he really plants his flag in the turf here as to at least what he believes in officially, you know, and it is a real nice way of getting to meet the bad guy. It's kind of like saying, this is for my country. It'll be interesting to see whether, you know, we really get to see how, that side of him that he's talking to these new recruits about, and where he suddenly realized, you know, packing the dead bodies of fallen comrades and soldiers, with heroin where maybe he fell a little, from this kind of, job that he, finds so, so honorable, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I'm going to end it with the second point that I found, which was this Distinguished Intelligence Medal.
Mm-hmm.
So, Operation Cerberus was a success, according to them. He took out some pretty bad people.
Uh-huh.
And that's what she says. You took out some bad people.
Yes.
So we can assume that the way that he has presented the success, or presented Cerberus, is considered successful to the CIA.
Is it definitely Operation Cerberus or another operation that he headed? So we see that Marion doesn't mention the name of the operation. She just says that over his time working for the CIA, he has taken out some high-level targets. She doesn't necessarily reference Cerberus, and we had heard previously from David that the operation was definitely not sanctioned. So don't know what that means just yet. Or I'm not going to say what that means just yet anyway. But we're not sure whether this is specifically about Cerberus or whether it may be other people that he took out after Frank left the army or possibly before Operation Cerberus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean,
Let's wait and see.
I wonder what Marion's role in this is. You know, it may not have been officially sanctioned by the Senate, but was it sanctioned within the CIA? Because certainly later on, she's kind of, I want to get things done. I'm about results. I'm not about playing politics. So, you know, she's got a definite focus there. Really good. But yeah, I think on to, War Journal note number 4. Madani and Stein under investigation and Madani and Russo under the covers. Yes, we have, kiss and tells and many a secret here between, Madani and Stein, and then lastly with Russo as well. Yeah, I really like Stein here. One of our followers over on the Facebook group, Jeff Childs, was saying how, you know, he's the man that keeps being put outside, the door, you know, asked to leave. And I completely agree with him here. I feel sorry for Sam Stein. He is constantly moving in and out of doors, and being told to leave rooms. But I do like that for the first time here, we get Madani trusting in him, willing to tell him her little secret, which was that she was pulled from her uptone car by Frank Castle. And of course, I think what I like even more then is that during the ensuing sort of Homeland investigation, into this failed operation, you know, Stein is very much, I'm gonna blab under oath, you know, I can't keep this a secret. But he stays loyal to her under this cross-examination. And I really like that. I'm hoping this really moves their partnership along. Because inherently I like the two of them, but I don't think it's been driven along as much as it could have been done at this stage. And I really want to see this work because I have a little soft spot for Sam Stein. And his, I mean, basically when he dies, he is going to be this ghost of going in and through walls and doors, you know, because that's just what he's used to at this stage.
In and out of rooms. Yeah. No, I do like this. I like that Madani finally trusts Stein with some information. It feels like she's definitely been keeping him at arm's length. Has been very much treating him like she's his boss all the time since she arrived. And at this stage, it's time for the two of them to work together. So yeah, I do like this moment. I do like that he keeps her secret as well. It would be pretty bad if you worked for Homeland Security and couldn't keep a secret, wouldn't it? So I'm glad that he did have a little bit of training in keeping secrets.
Definitely, but that's the same thing that Marion says about the CIA. In an organization full of secret keepers. How come her potential promotion and aim for directorship isn't a secret?
Aye.
Office gossip costs lives.
I'm telling you, yeah, that should be the CIA's coffee mug mantra.
I'm referencing that kind of from propaganda in the UK, which was aimed at making sure that people didn't sort of have a loose tongue, so that potential spies during World War II didn't pick up any sensitive information.
Of course.
I think it was like careless talk cost lives.
Or a loose lip sig chips.
Yes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I really do enjoy this Madani Stein kind of character arc. What I'm finding is, as John said, it is really slow. Like, just get on with it. We're 5 episodes in now. Like, we're nearly halfway, people. What are you trying to tell me with this story? I suppose the only thing I can get from this is that Stein will not crack under pressure.
Well, he's now on her side, yeah.
Well, we thought he would crack under the investigation pressure. That was what we expected. That's what they led you to believe. And then they flipped it that no, he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, really good.
Speaking of loose lips sinking ships, it is Sam Stein's fault that the attack on Gunnar Henderson happens, because he comes into Dinah Madani's office reading out the names of all of the former members of Frank's task force, which is being overheard by William Rawlins. So by having this office gossip or office discussion that is had by Sam Stein, unfortunately Gunnar Henderson and Frank Castle are both in the crosshairs of William Rawlins.
Yeah, but I suppose that's it. In this given situation, does Sam Stein know that the office is tapped because he is more than meets the eye? Or, is it kind of, are we going to get a real partnership between these two on an equal footing fighting for the same cause? Or is there a betrayal in the air between these two?
So firstly, you think Stein is more than meets the eye. Is he a Decepticon or Autobot? What does he transform into?
Well, that's it. Does he transform into a Transformer like Madonna, or is he a Decepticon? Because actually he's involved in the same way that Carson Wolf is, the same way that Agent Orange. So is he giving Agent Orange those names knowing that the office is tapped? In like with Luke Cage, is this a case of Misty Knight and her partner who ends up being Dodge?
Maybe.
Actually, it's a good theory. It's something I've been thinking about too. Like, how do you make that character even more? Which is that you build this relationship with Madani up until towards the end, and then pull the curtain back that he's actually been one of the leaders in the Homeland Security infiltration.
Yeah, he's Megatron.
I did think it was interesting that Rollins is not listening live to their conversation. If you notice, they have the conversation and then a little bit later Rollins is listening back to a tape of the conversation. Yeah, because it's being repeated. He's not listening live to it. So potentially somebody's dropping off that tape. It's not just a bug that he's listening to, or he's just going into his office and listening back on the recording of the day. Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. Sam Stein is still to be confirmed as a genuine member of Homeland Security here. Working with Madani and not against her, I think.
See, I love thrillers. I love that you have to work out whether any character is trustworthy or not.
And Madani, speaking of loose lips sink ships, loose lips sinks Russo, I think, in this episode.
Wow, this is potentially the most graphic sex scene we have ever had in a Marvel Cinematic Universe, including Netflix, episode.
I still think Jess and Luke is much hotter and much more graphic than this one.
I don't know. I think I'm with Chris here.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, the Jess and Luke one was just all about superpowers. This is just hot.
Yeah, it's certainly on a par
right.
with the first Luke and Jessica moment, I think. And I mean, we have with Russo as well, him kind of bragging to Frank previously in one of the other episodes about his abilities and that, why should this talent be wasted when he gets back from active service?
Mm-hmm.
He goes on from active service into active duty, I suppose. I think it's really good. I think it's healthy that this stuff is shown in Marvel because, I mean, it's like, this is life. It's where babies come from. Or not, maybe. But I suppose, as much as the violence that Frank Castle has, this is another part of life that happens.
Can I just say, I felt so sorry almost for Dinah Madani. She's just had a car accident. Did you see those bruises at the opening of this episode? And even when Russo touches her lightly, you get a little wince out of her. I'm not too sure how painful sex must be after that when he is touching quite a lot of her body.
She was in pain. The question is, she's got what she wants from Russo. That is the thing. She's gotten everything she thinks she can get from Russo. To the point where he still thinks Castle's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, is this her just trying to continue a lead? So does she think she can get more out of Russo? Or is she actually getting genuine emotions for Russo? Or is she just horny, to put it very bluntly?
Is she literally working the case, or is she trying to just get a release from sort of everything that's gone on? But yeah, I think it's interesting, this whole idea of her and Russo hooking up. You know, he knows that she's trying to extract information from him. But it seems as though they also do have something, or at least, you know, just on a pure physical front.
Yeah.
Or, you know, is Russo working her in terms of, you know, what is his role here with Kandahar, you know, other than just simply, being a member of the team with Frank? Is he this benefactor for the war vets and just heads up this sort of private security firm with Anvil? Is there some deeper, darker connection with Schoonover, even with Agent Orange, that we still haven't seen yet? And so, you know, I think this relationship is really, really interesting, because they certainly don't mind connecting, whether it's in the bar, in the bedroom, at the shooting range, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's all fairly on the nose. They both know that they're trying to look for information from one another, or at least Russo at the moment is absolutely clear that she is trying to find out more information about Kandahar. Yes. So I think this is a really interesting, complex situation of these two characters that have led to this moment where, you know, Billy and Dinah do get intimate with one another. And it's kind of an interesting direction for this relationship, in all seriousness. And I think it was really good to see, actually. So from one member of Frank's unit to another, we have the tracking of Gunnar Henderson and the rescue of him. This kind of proxy war between Frank and Agent Orange through these special ops guys. Like, for me, this was absolutely fantastic, drawn out sequence of first person shooting style. I just loved it. It felt those body cams, seeing the guns, and even with Gunnar Henderson, just kind of so elemental and raw, sort of all in camouflage, you know, pretending to be in his little cabin. The bow and arrow, I thought it was the tripwires, everything about it really screamed Homeland here, and I really enjoyed it, I have to say.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool, and congratulations, Chris, you did work out exactly what was happening. Yes, the person filming the death of Zubair, the murder of Zubair, was Gunnar Henderson, who is the person that shared the footage. So well done, Chris, for catching that one.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Academy Awards. I'd like to thank the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Netflix universe, all our fellow defenders. This is not just for me. This is a win for all of us.
Yes, it's one we got right. Well done, Chris. But he is the only other member of the team other than Billy Russo that's had a line, really. So, it wasn't that far to guess that it would have been Gunnar Henderson. He was the guy that came up to Frank in episode 2 and quoted the Bible passage at him. And then when Frank kind of shunned him, he went, "I'm only joking. I'm not really that much into the Bible." So, yeah, I do like this character. It's kind of interesting that we saw that moment of him where he was a bit jokey and a bit kind of had a little bit of a playful moment with Frank. And now we see him completely gone to ground because of the fact that he knows there's someone after him. He knows that he needs to hide out from what's going on. Yeah, and he's right to, because here comes Agent Orange with his new gang of members of the army, or
yeah, it looks kind of like members of some kind of special unit, at least in training, maybe, and that this is an exercise. I mean, a real life exercise, but one that, you know, they've been told these are enemies of the state that need to be taken down, or at least Gunnar Henderson, because we do have that moment when Rawlins discovers that Frank is still alive. I thought that was really good. You know, the ghost comes into view here
as he stares down the camera directly into Rawlins. Yeah, I thought that was really good. One of the interesting things about this scene, I'm not sure about it. It's a weird one. I love the scene, I must say, but it is a very strange idea that all of these people that Frank is slaughtering effectively are all doing exactly what Frank did in Kandahar. They're all working for Rollins. They're all in those exact same positions like he was. I point, you kill effectively was what he was told back in Kandahar. That's what all of these people are doing. And Frank's not holding back at all, really, is he?
No.
He sees all of these guys as his enemy, not giving them any chance to talk over the fact I used to work in your situation, anything like that. He's taken out every single one of them like they're his enemies that he would have fought in Kandahar.
Yeah, it's that idea of just wounding them, rather than killing them or knocking them out with the butt of a rifle or something.
Yeah, no, we did not see any butt of rifle. All we saw was an arrow to the neck.
Yes, that was pretty brutal.
That was brutal and amazingly cool.
Yeah.
It was Gunnar, wasn't it?
It was Gunnar, yeah. So, I found this really interesting. One, how did they find Gunnar? So, obviously, they've known about Gunnar for quite a while. They knew he was alive.
Yes.
And they just would have got the name Gunnar again from Dinah's discussion. Mm-hmm. And it was just, the timing here is quite interesting. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
I think this is Cerberus 2.0.
Okay, yep.
This is Rollins' personal army.
Yes.
For clandestine and on the ground kind of homeland, if you will, operations. But I just thought this was an interesting. I thought, because we had seen some of these scenes in the trailers. We had seen one or two of them, like, so Frank popping out, and some of the teaser clips was him kind of in the woods. Now, it wasn't these exact scenes, like, it seemed like they cut some of them, from the actual episode, but it was overall, I thought we had seen everything.
Right.
I was wrong. This was very well put together. It was an interesting battle, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought Frank was down. I thought we were going to have Gunnar dead, Frank down, and taken into custody.
Right. This one is something that really felt like it was coming straight from Punisher Max. It felt like those moments when Punisher is fighting against an entire force as a one-man army. But he also is supported by Gunnar here, which I like. I like the fact. And I also like the fact that it starts out with him getting injured. So he gets, this is him injured. This is him with an arrow in his shoulder. He's not at full capacity either, and is still able to take out this replacement army effectively that Rollins has set up, which is quite cool.
Yeah, and he gets hit by a bullet as well. I have to say, like, were kind of Gunnar and Frank come back together and try and defend their position, after they've taken one of the guys out, the guy who's impaled on that trap. I have to say, I think the shooting of that scene was fantastic, where effectively they are in a crossfire situation. And I loved how, Dearbhla shot this scene, because you see the strategy of military tactics play here, where one of the guys comes round, shoots from behind the tree, goes back, but someone on the other side of their position comes out and fires. So they're turned away from him. And it's really clever sort of tactics here by this team, but slowly and surely, they start getting picked off one by one. And primarily, it's Micro who we have to thank here, from his little, drone that is being used as air support, where he can pick out the members of the attacking force on Gunnar and Frank and feed that information back to Frank. And it's a really nice, sort of in a nutshell, sort of just how military operations work. I mean, you think of the news and you think of drones and people being in position doing recon and all this. Yeah, this was a really great scene. I absolutely love from start to finish, from when Frank and Gunnar meet up and that kind of initial standoff to them being run down by this team. Just how it was put together, that whole sequence, I thought was brilliant. Definitely. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. The one bit I found slightly was just the actual air support from Micro, where you hear the drone take off. You can hear it visibly, audibly, I should say. And yet, when it's flying above the forest, they can't hear it.
Right.
And I'm like, what, did he just go stealth mode? And it goes ding, and it just goes super silent. I'm like, no, it's a drone. That's all people would have heard. Like, it was like, oh, shoot that out of the air. Someone's giving him support from the air.
Or some kid locally is playing with his drone.
Potentially, but still shoot it down, because that kid has a drone. He doesn't deserve a drone. Anyway.
I thought there were moments where you could hear the drone overhead, but I wonder if it was just a heat of the battle thing. I mean, I know what you mean, Chris, definitely. I was thinking, do they know that they're being kind of reconned here? Or they should realize it given, you know, the number of their team that are being killed off. Yeah, I also wondered about this, but I just wondered whether it was a heat of the battle, you know, the heat of the chase, where they're sort of tracking him down, but maybe they thought it was their own recon, just not working very well, or something like that.
Yeah,
you know?
they certainly don't have a huge amount of time during this fight to think about much, other than tracking down Frank and Gunnar. There's not a huge amount of time that goes past as Frank takes out people left, right and center. Definitely some moments that were reminiscent of Predator here, as Frank hides out underneath a bed of leaves and takes out one guy from behind as Gunnar takes out another guy from behind a tree. I thought that was really cool. And the big one for me really was a real Aliens moment as Rollins looks on as the cameras of his guys, and 3 or 4 of them go out one by one as Frank takes out each of the members of the team. Thought that was a really nice touch there. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this scene. But gentlemen, I think this brings us to the end of our notes or points for this episode. Do you have any Easter egg notes that you want to bring in at this point?
The only one for me, which I thought was really good fun, and it's kind of a bit of a behind the scenes of the podcast. There's one thing that I always tell John he's not allowed to say on the podcast, because it's when you're in an argument with John personally, when you're in a pub or having a chat with him, and he'll try and get a point across to you. He uses the phrase, "my point being," which is effectively his way of stopping you talking so that he can get his next point in. And I love that Micro uses exactly the same technique with Frank Castle in this. Chris, you've heard John say this before.
I'm not gonna lie. I thought they literally wrote this character for John.
So he's already been envious of the fact that Micro has his abs, and now he's using his phrase, and he's going to play one of his favorite comic characters, Gene Wilder, in a future movie. Yeah, I think Micro is John and John is Micro. Just need the beard.
Yes.
Exactly, just need the beard.
Sorry, John.
One final bit, just I really enjoyed, not really an Easter egg, but I really enjoyed where the Hounds of Hell, the Cerberus, that whole discussion when basically calling, yeah, you were Spot the dog.
It's kind of a funny little moment, but again, I love how Frank just shuts that down. Really cool.
But then we have Micro going, my point being.
Yes. I think this is character assassination.
Well, in an
No,
episode.
I do use it. I do use it. I readily admit that. But, yeah, it was nice to see it being such a well-used phrase in the Marvel universe.
Mm-hmm.
Go Micro. But with that character assassination out of the way, I think we can ask my co-hosts whether they defend this episode of The Punisher or not. So first off, Christoph in the big city, do you defend this episode of The Punisher?
I do defend it. Once more, I am starting to enjoy this, each episode more and more. The season is ramping up for me. Slow start, I'm not gonna lie. I said this last episode. But as each episode progresses, I'm finding myself more and more drawn into the intrigue, drawn into the thriller-like aspect. But given my Marvel je ne sais quoi, in certain spades as well. The action scene with Gunnar and Frank was fantastic. The actual reveal of William Rollins, that speech, fantastically designed and written so that you understand potentially some of his thought process in this.
Mm-hmm.
Madani and Paige, as I said, I think this is potentially one of the best character scenes for Paige so far. She's given 2 really strong morale-based but also intelligence-based stances, and not just emotional-based, which sometimes fails for her character because she seems like a whiny little schoolgirl versus the strong woman that she is in this scene. But I'm not going to go into this a page assassination, character assassination piece. I think that's the same, character assassination, because John said character assassination. It's a good word. I'm going to stick with it. The road trip was fun. I loved the sub scene. And then finally, Madani and Stein's kind of investigation. It was a well thought out. I'm now more interested about Stein and where that storyline's going to go. Mm-hmm. Is he just going to be the genuine good cop, best friend, partner, or is there more to the story? So overall, I defend this episode. I think, as I said, it's a strong 5th episode. I want to see where it goes. I'm hoping we don't get a bit of drag episodes and exposition episodes. But let's wait and see. John, do you defend this episode of The Punisher?
I do defend this episode of The Punisher. I'm not sure what kind of criteria to use here, actually. I've got a few, but I think this is, for me, 4.5 milky winks out of 5 in honor of Bill Rawlins. Yes. I do think that his introduction was fantastic. Really, really enjoyed seeing him sort of with his speech at the start to the new recruits. Really good. And then for me, absolutely enjoyed the chase through the woods of Gunnar and Frank by this special ops team, with obviously Rawlins at the desk at the console watching this live. I thought it was really, really good. Really enjoyed Karen Page in this episode as well, and her interaction with Madani. And I liked Madani in this episode. She really grew on me, both in terms of her interactions and trusting Stein. I think, her relationship with Billy Russo is really interesting, that this is being, done, this kind of technique of trying to find information. It's something different for Marvel. And, you know, I always tip my hat to that kind of writing. It, you know, pushing that boundaries for this particular studio and so on. Yeah. My point being is that, I really enjoyed that foot-long sub moment on the road trip as well. I think it was a genuine moment of hilarity. And I think that, Ebon Moss-Bachrach played that perfectly, as well as Jon Bernthal as well, with his hurt, you know, his wounded dog look, back at him, as he's eating some kind of dehydrated gunk. I just thought was fantastic. So for me, yeah, this really good. This series is just building and building for me at the moment with my ratings. I'm really enjoying, you know, episode by episode. It's getting really good for me. Really enjoyed this episode. Yeah. So 4.5 milky winks out of 5, which I think is better than my other one that I was going to go with, which was slightly metaphysical, which was 4.5 endless echoes of loneliness out of 5. Which I like, you know, that's kind of deep, I think.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah, I prefer the Milky Winks.
Yeah, me too. It's like Milky Moos or something. It's some kind of new sweet.
Yes.
But with that, Derek, do you defend this episode of The Punisher?
I do defend this episode of The Punisher. I think this is probably my favourite of the season so far. I think everybody gets something cool to do, or something interesting to do in this episode. And I have to say the direction for this episode is probably my favourite. The scene in the woods, some elements of it like first person shooters for gamers, some elements of it like Aliens, some like Predator. Thought that was really, really interesting. Definitely one of my favourite episodes so far, and will hopefully only get better. With our defense out of the way, time for the feedback for this episode. If you want to send us in your feedback, as always, you can email us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com or pop on the website at defenderstvpodcast.com and leave us a voicemail just by clicking the send a voicemail button. Or you can join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/defenderstvpodcast.com and leave your comments in the spoiler posts we have up there for each of the episodes for this season of The Punisher. First up from our Facebook group, we have Tina Brown.
Yes. Tina Brown says, I am preferring the Frank micro arc at the moment. As long as Dinah is a step behind them, all she seems to do is uncover stuff we already know. That hurts the pacing a bit, but Micro is giving a real great performance as a man right on the edge. Having gotten this far, I think I have to finish today. Very suspenseful, and I love that. More of a thriller vibe than the other series. Yeah, absolutely. There is a great thriller vibe here in this Punisher series so far.
Definitely. Justin Mansfield says, OMG, that Madani Russo scene. Yeah, I think we're all a bit shocked about that scene being in this episode of a Netflix Marvel show.
Yes.
Longtime fellow defender Ronaldo goes on to say, love the scene in the woods. Little bit of aliens there with Agent Orange watching all the mercs GoPros. You really do get the sense that poor Gunner has lived in a lonely existence away from the world. We never see him in civvies. He is and always will be a soldier. Yet another comment, much like Lewis, on the effects wars can have on soldiers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. There's many different commentaries throughout the series of what war has done to the soldiers that are left behind after they've finished their war. And this is another sad ending to another character that was on the team.
No, absolutely. It's definitely death by paranoia and obviously the gunshot, ultimately to his stomach. R.I.P. poor old Gunner.
Well, is it really paranoia if they are out to get you?
Well, that's true.
That's kind of the thing.
That is true. You never know. Micro may have gotten back out of that van and dragged Gunner back into the van with himself and Frank. No?
Yeah, I wonder how Frank is going to view the fact that he left a man out there to be eaten by the worms.
Yeah, we never know. I guess we will know next time, actually. I guess we'll find that out. Jeff Charles says, as John mentioned, I think I'd have a real complex if I was Stein. He keeps getting kicked out of every room in every building that he's in. Yeah, poor Sam Stein.
Yeah, absolutely. It's time for Sam to have his own office.
Absolutely. And he can kick everybody else out of it.
Exactly.
No, they just kick him out of it.
Get out of your own room, Sam.
I need this room for a moment. Get out, Sam.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for all the feedback.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, as always, please head on over and subscribe, rate us, and leave a review over on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, or any other good or evil podcast catcher. It is always great to share the love, and by doing so, you really help us grow our podcast.
And we previously had some comments about why your grandmothers may want to know about this podcast. Well, I am here to tell you why. Grandmothers like The Punisher. And settle in. This is a bit of a long one. We're going to go on a journey here. Go with me. Go with me, if you will. We're going to go on a journey where a grandmother is remembering her time, her long-lost Billy who went off to war. Do you know what Billy looked like? He looked like Jon Bernthal. Do you know who he sounded like? Frank Castle. Your grandmother is going to relive the youth of her long love before he disappeared to war and never came back. Rest in peace. Unfortunately, so tell your grandmother about the Punisher and how her lost love is back, reincarnated in a anti-hero named Punisher. Now, okay, I'm going to work on this, people. Okay. Every episode I'm going to come back with a better and better reason why your grandmother would like this.
I thought we were going with grandfathers this season.
I was going to, but the grandmothers love it. I'm telling you.
Well, thanks for that, Chris. As John mentioned, please subscribe to the podcast to hear all of Chris's reasons why grandmothers or grandfathers might like our podcast.
I can only think that it is Billy Russo. That's why grandmothers like the Punisher. Because we have the Marvel abs on show.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back with our review of the next episode of The Punisher and maybe another reason from Chris. Episode 6, The Judas Goat, will be out next Friday, the 15th of December, and every week from then on until we finish the series. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, as always, thank you so much for listening. It's been a pleasure. I'm off to my echo chamber of endless loneliness. It's equivalent to the Fortress of Solitude in Superman. But I will be back from my lonely echo chamber to speak with you next time. Thanks for joining us.
And because it's an echo chamber, John just seems to go on and on and on. Thank you very much, fellow defenders, and we will chat to you next episode.
Chris, this is your final time recording from New York for Defenders TV Podcast, isn't it?
It is. I have been to Hell's Kitchen. I have tried my best to find multiple recording places so I could get some behind the scenes photos or something for the group, for our accounts and for our fellow defenders. Unfortunately, I think they like recording at like 3 a.m. or something like that, because I look like Daredevil now. I'm just loitering around Hell's Kitchen at like 3 in the morning going, hello? No, okay.
I love it.
But yes, I will be back in the Green Isles of Ireland for our next episode. And hopefully I will have some better news about why your granny or grandfather may enjoy The Punisher.
One final question about your time in New York, Chris. Did you ever find out whether every single greasy spoon type diner serves sourdough bread with their eggs?
I think he was in a hipster diner. I'm sorry, people.
Even though she did slag him about being a hipster. Okay. Good research there, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. From your defender in the field, I have been Chris Jones, and this has been Defenders TV Podcast. Until next time, we will see you for The Punisher, Episode 6, The Judas Goat, next Friday.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. Bye. 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 That's my echo chamber.
I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money.
And I think that kind of brings us to the end of our War Journal notes.
Yes.
And I think that brings us to the end of our War Journal points. I can't get that's fucking.
One more
What
time.
is wrong?
One more time.
Okay, one more time. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this scene. But gentlemen, I think this brings us to the end of our notes or points for this episode. Do you have any Easter egg notes that you want to bring in at this point?
Time for the feedback for this episode. If you want to send us in your feedback, as I mentioned earlier on, you can email us at feedback@Gotham. Balls. 2 podcasts in today. I did it the other way around in the other podcast.